Hello everyone, and welcome to Dutch Greybeard. In this episode of Treasures of Reading, I will wrap up what I have read in the months of March and April of 2025. These were extremely good reading months for me in terms of quantity and quality. Inevitably, there were a couple of meh books in the mix as well, but overall I'd sign up for another 2 months like this right away. I read 15 books, which is much for me, with a total page count of 5,304. The shortest book had 114 pages in my edition, and the biggest was 1,107 pages long. The average page count per book was 353 pages. The lowest score I gave was 50 points out of 100, but I also gave out the highest possible rating of 100 points out of 100. Of these 15 books, 12 were fantasy, 2 were literary fiction, and I also read 1 children's book. This chart gives you an overview of all the books I read these 2 months. As always, at the end of this video, I will show you all the books I have read since the beginning of my journey into fantasy, starting in January of 2023. Let's go through all the books in the chronological order in which I read them. For some of these, I have already made a reading experience video, 2 in 1 case actually. The links to these you can find in the description below. In this video, I will breeze through those fairly quickly. Should you want to hear more of what I have to say about them, please check out the dedicated video. For the other books that haven't been honored with a video, I will take some extra time. That is, if I have anything to say about them, of course. The first book is Last Argument of Kings by Joe Abercrombie. I started reading this one on February 24 and I needed until March 5 to finish its 670 pages. After this final book in the famous first Law Trilogy, I had to conclude that I won't be joining the Abercrombie fandom. I liked it, I enjoyed it, and I can definitely see the writing skills here. But the overall lack of plot was my main disappointment. Still, with 77 points out of 100, I really had a good time with it. On the trilogy as a whole, I did a separate video that you can check out if you'd like to hear more about my reading experience. My next book was a buddy read I did with B.J. Minton. The 710 pages of The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss took me about 1 week to read, and it is one of the best books I have ever read. Nothing less. Both me and BJ absolutely loved this book. I went on to read the second book not long after this one, which we'll get to in a minute. Earlier this year, I had read A Song for Arbonne by Guy Gavriel Kay, which I rated with the exceptionally high 100 points out of 100. And for The Name of the Wind, I could not find any excuse to rate it any lower than that, 100 points. So now I have 2 books with the highest possible score, and we're not even halfway through 2025 yet. Check out my video on this book if you want to hear me gush about it. Immediately after this one, I picked up The Slow Regard for Silent Things, Rothfuss's novella about one of the characters, Ori. My anticipation for an encore of the same brilliance got squashed pretty soon. I did not like it. In his foreword, the author warns the reader. If you have read my other books, I think it's only fair to warn you that this is a bit of a strange story. Usually I don't mind strange, but this time it felt as if I was stuck in a nightmare, repeatedly performing meaningless actions without any better explanation than that it feels right. Even though the prose is beautiful, as can be expected from this author, the story, if one can even call it that, is repetitive and extremely boring. We know from the novels that Ori is different. She regards inanimate, silent things as sentient beings, or at least as entities that have feelings, and Ori communicates with them in her own way. All her actions are bent on giving stuff their rightful place in the underthing where she lives. Next to these seemingly random and meaningless actions, she's trying to find 3 presents for when Kvothe comes to visit her next time. There's a lot of washing of hands and feet, and that's about it really. To drag that out over some 160 pages is really asking a lot of the reader's patience and empathy. In his afterword, the writer admits that this story does not follow the rules of storytelling. The problem with the story is that only Ori understands the meaning of her actions, which remain an enigma for the reader. At least for this one. I very soon lost interest. Even though it is short, it became a chore to finish. 5 days for 160 pages with illustrations and very liberal margins is very long. It is too surreal, too experimental, and simply too strange. In his afterword, Rothfuss writes things as, "I knew deep in my heart of hearts that my new wrought story was a train wreck. People are going to read this and be pissed. It wasn't doing the things a proper sort of story should do. It was, by all traditional metric, a mess." But he liked it. His editor liked it. And his better readers liked it. And we shouldn't forget that his publisher must have forced his hand. It had been 3 years since The Wise Man's Fear was published, and to soften the wait for Book 3, this no doubt came in handy. I understand all of that, and perhaps I am one of the few to feel this way, but in my honest opinion, this novella should have stayed in Rothfuss's own drawers and remain unpublished. For the effort of writing it, I gave it 50 points out of 100. A large portion of that rating was earned because the novella reminded me of this writer's immaculate prose. Then I read a book that has always intrigued me because of its title, but somehow never got around to reading, until it was kindly gifted to me by my friend B.J. Minton, one of the earliest and most loyal followers of this channel. I'm talking about To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. In this vintage classic edition, it has 485 pages, and I read it between 13 and 19 March. I'm still pondering whether I should do a separate video on this book. There is no doubt that it deserves that, but it's a classic from 1960 and has been studied and commented upon for 65 years by now. There is literally nothing that I can possibly add to that. On the other hand, it simply is my reading experience, which in a way is always unique. Now, while talking about it, I believe I will make a video about this book. I loved it. It is meticulously composed, and mainly because it is told from the POV of an 8-year-old girl, the entire racist Southern American society of 1935, in which the story is set, is viewed from a pure and completely innocent mind. This gives the reader a very refreshing way of looking at what happened in those days. The basic misunderstanding of how adults view the world in a racist way is disarming. It's an ingenious book with many prosaic pearls to cherish. So, yes, I've made up my mind. For the few whom it may concern, look out for a reading experience video on To Kill a Mockingbird, which I rated with 93 points out of 100. I'm very glad I finally got round to reading this special book. My next read is also connected to BJ. He had so much joy reading the Kate Daniels urban fantasy series by a writing couple publishing under the name of Ilona Andrews that he got me interested. I bought the first 7 of the 10-book series and was some 3 days occupied with the 260 pages of the first one, Magic Bites. Unfortunately, I don't share BJ's enthusiasm for this kind of fantasy. The badass kind of mystery solver Kate Daniels didn't really grow on me. It's obvious that there's more to her than meets the eye, but we don't get to see a lot of that in this first book. The second book, which I will talk about later on, lifts the veil that hangs before her mysterious background a teeny tiny bit more. It is a murder mystery set in a sort of dystopian version of the American city of Atlanta, where waves of magic wreak havoc to the higher buildings and affect life in more than one way. There are monsters, shape changers, zombies, and many other weird creatures. Now, I'm not much of a murder mystery reader, although every now and then it can provide a nice read. It's just that most of the time I couldn't care less who has done it. In this case, I would say that 25% of the book concerns itself with the solving of the murder, and the other 75% are sidebars, world building, and seemingly unrelated descriptive events. Occasionally, I found Kate's Navy SEAL kind of behavior mildly funny, but just as often the humor was a bit cheesy. Only once did I laugh out loud. It's just like one of the zombie operators says, the bravado is amusing, but it becomes tiresome. There is a multitude of side characters that I too easily lost track of and didn't really care for. But one absolute positive, the writing is good. I scored Magic Bites with 67 points out of 100. It was a fun read, but not memorable. I will read the other books in the series I have, but I will not buy the remaining 3. Because of The Name of the Wind, I really wanted to read Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. I read the first 3 books in the series in a Dutch translation ages ago. The story itself had faded in my memory, but the importance of names had stuck. Some time ago, I bought this beautiful edition, and I really enjoyed this reread. The books are short, certainly in this edition with large pages and a small font size. The 130 pages of the first book, A Wizard of Earthsea, took me about 4 days. I really paced myself and took all the time to savor the prose. It is a YA and strongly symbolical fairy tale where the author does not beat about the bush. Things progress fast story-wise, and a long journey can be told in just one paragraph. It is nice to not have to plough through hundreds or more pages to get to a place in a story. I absolutely love the trope of the apprentice with a destiny or a prophecy. The importance of names is beautifully described during the teachings the main character, Ged or Jed, receives. To change this rock into a jewel, you must change its true name. And to do that, my son, even to so small a scrap of the world, is to change the world. But you must not change one thing, one pebble, one grain of sand, until you know what good and evil will follow on that act. To light a candle is to cast a shadow. Rereading this book was a full-on nostalgic experience, which transported me back to my childhood, discovering the power of imagination for one of the first times. The story about this young wizard-to-be who, in his youthful pride, unwittingly releases the darkness into the world, which he, of course, has to set right again, is beautiful. It is very tropey and classical, but I loved it. One might see the deeper hidden message in this story as know thyself. Any story with this at its roots has my interest. I gave A Wizard of Earthsea 89 points out of 100. In this gorgeous edition, the author has written an afterword for each book, very clarifying and interesting to read. Le Guin reminds the readers that fantasy was pretty much nowhere in the publishing industry of 1967, apart, of course, from The Lord of the Rings. Keeping that in mind makes A Wizard of Earthsea all the more special. At the same time as the Earthsea novel, I read a children's book, A Little Princess by Frances Hodgson Burnett. It's 223 pages in one of these ugly POD editions from Amazon. Took me 3 days to read. This is such a lovely tale, which is something of a mix between Cinderella, Annie, The King and I, and the Grimm's fairy tale of the Little Match Girl. The story is totally predictable and at times rather unbelief-worthy, but it was lovely nonetheless. I had a smile on my face while reading it, and even though I am much older than Sarah Crewe in the story, I fully experienced her ordeal. A well-written, very traditional middle-grade tale that was first published in 1905. It is very hard to give this book any rating because in no way does it compare to that of the YA or adult books I read. But if someone were to force my hand, I'd give it 78 points out of 100. The most important thing to say is that I had a very nice time reading it. My next read, again from this beautiful Ursula K. Le Guin Earthsea edition, was The Tombs of Atuan, the second book in the series. With 114 pages in this edition, this is even a shorter novel than the first one. I spent about 5 days with it and enjoyed it even better than A Wizard of Earthsea. The story is more compelling to me, and the way it is composed is also impressive. I don't want to spoil anything, even though these are ancient books, but let's just say that the development of the main character, the one who is called J.R.R, but whose real name is Tenar, is extremely well done, especially considering the relatively few pages this book holds. The writing is rather formal, with almost biblical elements like "and lo," but that is perfectly in tune with the ritualistic nature of J.R.R.'s tasks. The story has depth and a fairy tale-like quality. I gave The Tombs of Atuan 90 points out of 100, and for now it is my favorite of the Earthsea books. The third book, which I will get to in a minute, didn't really do it for me, and the later books in the series I still have to read. I'm so glad to have read them again. It was as if I read them for the first time, but not entirely. Somewhere in my consciousness was this vague memory of the excitement of reading such a wonderful story for the first time. That feeling of setting foot in a completely new and unexplored realm that holds countless of surprises and beauties. Next is my audio experience of The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien. I read the books of The Lord of the Rings multiple times, first in Dutch and later in English. This time I'm experiencing them through audio. I've said it before on this channel, I'm enjoying it, and it is good to replace the movies with the original story again, but it is taking me forever to listen to a book. This one I started listening to on January 22nd, and I finished it on April 4. I don't think I have to say anything about this book. We all know it, and practically everybody loves it, including me. So I'll keep it brief. 90 points out of 100. And I've started listening to The Return of the King already, and this one may even take me longer than 2.5 months. Next, I finished reading the second book in the Kingkiller Chronicles by Patrick Rothfuss, The Wise Man's Fear. This 1100-page tome kept me occupied for more than 2 weeks, and I have to say I'm still recovering from that overwhelming experience. The 2 books in this as of yet unfinished series have completely blown me away. I already mentioned the 100 points score for The Name of the Wind. This book scored 99 points out of 100, not the highest score because of a few minuscule tiny flaws I experienced that truly hardly deserve mentioning. The fact that I made 2 separate videos for this book, a spoiler-free one and a spoiler-filled version, says it all really. I love this author, and whatever comes of book 3 or his clumsy promises will not change any of that. Rothfuss is a master storyteller and a master prose maker. Then I read The Farthest Shore, Book 3 in the Earthsea series by Ursula Guin, 146 pages in my edition, which I read from the 2nd until the 10th of April. All the elements of a good story in the YA vein are here again. It's just that it is all a little bit too symbolic. Also, the relationship between Ged, who by now is an aged wizard, and the young Aaron somehow doesn't seem to really get going. It's mainly about exchanging wise lines and instructing one another. Thankfully, that goes both ways, otherwise it would have been really annoying. In the beginning of the story, this is all nice and okay, but gradually it began to show that the story merely served the symbolic meaning of the author. And that rarely works in a good way. A fantasy book, to me, should always be about the story first and foremost. If an author wants to put any message under all of that, that's fine, as long as it is not too obvious and as long as it doesn't take over the story. Which is exactly what happens in The Farthest Shore, in my experience. The allegory of life versus death and their intricately interwovenness is all over the place. The philosophical heart is interesting, but the philosophy almost became the entire body. I gave this one 74 points out of 100. It prompted me to take a break. The other books in the series are new for me, and I will certainly read them at some point. But for now, my hunger for Earthsea nostalgia has been stilled. Next was a short read. In 2 days' time, I devoured the last novel by Paul Auster, an author I greatly admire. Baumgartner counts only 202 pages, and it reads really fast. For one last time, Auster shows his mastery at writing intricate sentences with a cadence to them that are a joy to this reader. Just one example. The main character, the writer, Cy Baumgartner, has lost his wife, Anna. Thinking about a metaphor of human suffering and loss, there is this meandering but wonderfully composed sentence. It is the trope Baumgartner has been searching for ever since Anna's sudden, unexpected death 10 years ago, the most persuasive and compelling analogue to describe what has happened to him since that hot, windy afternoon in August 2008, when the gods saw fit to steal his wife from him, the full vigor of her still youthful self, and just like that his limbs were ripped off his body, all 4 of them, arms and legs together at the same time, and if his head and heart were spared from the onslaught, it was only because the perverse, snickering gods had granted him the dubious right to go on living without her. Baumgartner is a beautiful little Auster, with everything in it that made one of my favorite writers. There is point of view weirdness when all of a sudden somebody other than Baumgartner starts talking in we about how the chapter we are reading will end. There are autobiographical references that make the reader wonder about what is real life and what isn't. There is this surrealistic atmosphere that gives random and everyday life events a kind of exciting vibe, as if at any time something terrible is about to happen. And there is this Auster prose that is almost patented and recognizable. I gave Baumgartner 87 points out of 100. It is definitely not my favorite Auster, but it is an Auster nonetheless. My second Kate Daniels adventure, Magic Burns, was slightly better than the first, but in another way it was also slightly worse. Again, 260 pages, which took me 3 days. I seriously considered DNFing around page 55, but I still picked it up again. I hate to stop reading a book in the middle of it, and I didn't regret it. The mystery in this installment is less straightforward, which is nice. Still, the strangeness and dystopianness of the setting, an alternate version of Atlanta, never really grew on me. I can appreciate the world building, the humor, and the mysterious background of Kate. But the badass behavior of all the untouchables, not only of Kate, but of other characters as well, began to annoy me, really. With lines like, "She had the kind of eyes one gets after life hammered out all softness." Also the terrible smells that make characters gag almost every 5 pages got boring. I gave Magic Burns 65 points out of 100. The thing is that I take books, any book, too seriously. And this is exactly the kind of book you should read with a pinch of salt at the ready. I have 5 Kate Daniel novels left, and the next one I'll try and remember that. Sourcery by Terry Pratchett was my first Discworld novel in 5 months. This is number 5 and the 3rd book in the Unseen University subseries. Because I was reading other very good books at the same time, Pratchett took a backseat. I started reading Sourcery on March 24 and finished it on April 18, almost a whole month for 334 pages. Nevertheless, I liked it. I highly doubt if I will ever become a true Discworld fan, but I am becoming more familiar with Pratchett's tangled way of telling his story. I mean that the story itself is constantly interrupted by asides and lengthy observations. Despite the long time it took me to read this one, I really enjoyed it. The story is entertaining and the humor is very good. I had to laugh out loud many times, especially with the Rincewind bashing by the author or by Rincewind himself. There are 8 levels of wizardry on the disc. After 16 years, Rincewind has failed to achieve even level 1. In fact, it is the considered opinion of some of his tutors that he is incapable of achieving level 0, which most normal people are born at. To put it another way, it has been suggested that when Rincewind dies, the average occult ability of the human race will actually go up by a fraction. Lots of other examples of fine prose delivering a good joke. To say that wizards are healthily competitive by nature is like saying that piranhas are naturally a little peckish, or simply beautiful prose. He wondered fuzzily where his train of thought had been derailed. Many more examples of Pratchett's mastery of the language, which I will save for a later time, perhaps. Often when reading a Discworld novel, I wonder why such a great writer didn't tell stories that may have interested me more. I realize how subjective such an observation is, but it is my reading experience. Nothing wrong with humor in writing, on the contrary. I would say it is a necessity in every book, but the absurdism of this story is why I am still not really a fan of the series. For Sourcery, my rating didn't go up higher than 70 points out of 100. I'm thinking about making a separate video one of these days about my relationship with this series. By now I have read 10 of the 41 Discworld novels, including the one I picked up right after Sourcery, Eric. I hadn't planned on reading this one. This is the 4th in the Unseen University subseries and number 9 in the series. At the end of Sourcery, one of the characters disappears, and I really wanted to see how the writer would bring that person back, which is why I read this short novel of 163 pages with lots of illustrations by Josh Kirby. The level of absurdity in this story is even higher than I had gotten used to by now. I was a little less inclined to laugh during this read, and at times I felt like that falling ass that keeps on falling, not twice but multiple times, in an apparent vain attempt to make it feel good. In between all my other reads, I spent 3 days with Eric, and it was okay at best. I gave it 67 points out of 100, still a decent 3.5 stars. I will go on reading Discworld books. First, because I already bought them. I don't know if you can see them in the screen. Yes, you can see them. They're over here. And it would seem such a waste to leave them unread. but second, because I somehow like them. In between other reads, they remind me to not take everything about reading too seriously. Just a 300 to 400 page escape from all the serious stories into complete absurdity with well cared for prose. What's not to like? These were the 15 books I read in March and April of this year. Did you read any of them? What are your thoughts on them? I'd love to hear about your reading experiences. The average rating for these 2 months of reading is 79.73 points out of 100, which compares to 4 stars. I am very happy with this. And let's not forget that it is the lesser books that make us appreciate the good ones all the better. Not only is it unrealistic to expect every book to be a 5-star read, I believe that it will get boring after a while. Thank you very much for watching this video. Until we meet again, at Dutch Greybeard.